When we were speaking, you told me that there was a lot of mystery around this hacker. So briefly, if you could just tell us, like, how did you contact him and how did you manage to get him to the interview and all of this mysterious process of setting it up? Just, I think it's a really fascinating story.
The first strange thing is that he wanted the world to know that he'd accessed Alaska's, and what he accessed was the central tabulator called GEMS, the actual computer, the central brain that brings in all the votes from the voting machines and accumulates them and produces the result. Who won? So he bragged on his Twitter account in 2016, "I've gained access." No mainstream media seemed to notice or take that seriously. I decided when I found out what he'd done was to try and understand from him why other experts would say it was credible. So I contacted Cyberzeist, not knowing exactly where in the world he lives. We did a series of Skype calls and emails in which I asked questions. Meanwhile, I was foiering the Alaska Division of Elections to find all the emails, internal emails I could, that showed that they recognized they had been hacked, but they didn't think it was serious.
So when you say FOIA, not everybody knows what that is. That's the Freedom of Information Act. And so when a journalist does a FOIA request, basically they're accessing documents that government agencies are required legally to provide to the public. So, and pretty much government emails are all subject to these Freedom of Information requests. So you were getting hold of the Alaska election officials' email accounts, and it showed that they actually knew that they had been penetrated?
Yeah, they said, "Commissioner, our system seems to have been accessed." He says he got into the system after just trying various states. On the 6th of November, 2 days before the election, definitely gained access on the 7th and continued on the 8th. I think Cyberzeist, this is his handle. He was a member of Anonymous years ago. He was surprised at his own success. Hari Hursty, our expert in the film, thinks that he used a tool that he won't tell us about, and that tool allowed him to jump from the public website that he had already broken into, and from there into the computer system called GEMS that was in the office of the Director of Elections.
And he was someone who was foreign, is that correct? So this was foreign interference.
Absolutely. He admits to hacking the system from India. Um, and there's a question as to whether he or any associate of his still retains access to that computer system. So I'd like to summarize Cyberzeist as I think, one of the greatest threats to America's elections. Not just him, not saying him personally. I think actually he's quite a moral person. He told us he believes in democracy. He doesn't think elections should be rigged. He was testing as to how far he could get in and what he could do. But he represents the kind of attack that isn't a virus. It's not injecting a virus into the system. It's someone getting in, obtaining full administrative privileges, can upload files, download files, change text, change votes, and sit there inside the system as an administrator that the rest of the systems people and the Division of Elections don't know about.
What you're saying is that a hacker could gain access, stay inside of an election system where they could change any votes they wanted, and just stay there for years and years and years, changing election after election after election. Is that correct?
Or just waiting until the one election that they wanted to influence.
This particular incident was foreign interference, but we could also have insider rigging this way. Somebody who works in the elections could also easily access a system this way and be changing results as well. It could be either this type of interference could be from both foreign and domestic players, correct?
Correct. My understanding is that once the access is completed, I mean, Cyberzeist found a vulnerability. There hadn't been a patch, and that allowed him to access the website in a way that got into its kind of, core program. And then from there, he got further into the office and the election system itself, because the election system shouldn't be connected to the public-facing website. But he says there was a connection.
So I'm just going to ask you one more question. My understanding is that in the UK, ballots are marked by hand for all voters who are able to mark by hand, and also counted by hand in public. I've seen like the big tables where UK residents come all together and just like put the ballots out and count them one by one. Is that correct?
Correct. For every general election, most elections around the country. Brexit, for example, it's a really good example, because Brexit was an enormous turnout for an election. It was cast and counted by hand in 24 hours.
Right. And although the United States has some challenges that other countries don't have, we tend to have more races on the ballot, and also sometimes many, many referendums. In California, sometimes they'll have 60, 70 referendums. So it is a lot of votes to count. But there are ways of handling that. For example, we could count certain races by hand. It would not be that hard to count the presidential race by hand.
Absolutely.
Or to randomly select to count the presidential race, and then randomly select one or two other races to count by hand. And as long as it was a random selection in public that was carefully, that had a lot of oversight, those random selections can be very effective in helping to just set up systems where you don't necessarily have to hand count every single race.
And I would say for this November, the Senate is incredibly important as well. I mean, not just for Democrats, for Republicans as well. There's no reason why you can't take the top races of Senate, Congress, and President and treat those as a greater national security threat, and count those, hand audit those in every single state. It's not that difficult.